Hi, I'm Steve Bunning. My son Max and I are alumni of PAC 388, and I used to help run the PAC 388 Pinewood Derby. I'm here today to help teach you a little bit about how to build your car and to show you how to use some of the tools that PAC 388 is going to provide to you. So the first thing you'll be getting from the PAC is going to be this car kit. So when you open the car kit, it has basically nine components. It has the block of wood, it has four wheels and four axles. Okay, these nails will serve as your axles for the car. What we're going to talk about today is how to drill holes for your axles. Now the car comes with a set of slots, but it's quite difficult actually to get the nails into these slots, and it's also difficult to get the nails in straight into these slots, such that your car, it's very difficult to get good wheel alignment when using these slots. So PAC 388 has been gracious enough to purchase a set of tools that will help you to drill holes that will allow your car to have optimal alignment and will help make your car go a lot faster. This is what's called the wheel jig, and you can see it's kind of labeled front and back. And basically, what you do with this wheel jig is you put your block into the jig, the smooth side down. Okay, so this side has the slots, and you will simply put your block of wood, and it might be a little bit of a tight fit. You can set it down and kind of might have to push firmly. Basically, you put the block into the jig like so, and then at the back, you'll want to set the block down on a hard, smooth surface. And what this is going to do is going to position the locations for the holes. So what you'll do is you'll set this and kind of make sure that everything is flush. And then you'll get the C-clamp. And you're going to clamp the wood block into the jig. So once you want to tap this down firmly and then hold tightly when you pick it up. Continue to hold tightly, and then we're going to put this into the jig. Put the jig and block assembly into the C-clamp. Okay, now we've got the block jig assembly tightened into the C-clamp, and the C-clamp will simply just hold this in place so it doesn't slide around when you're drilling the holes. This is called a pin vise, and basically it's just a small mini drill, and you're going to use this to drill the holes through the block. So on each corner of the car, you're going to see there are holes that are in the jig, and you'll stick this pin vise into the hole, and you start rotating like this. You start drilling the hole. Now this process is going to take probably 5 to 10 minutes, okay, per car. So it might take about 2 minutes per hole. But basically, you just do what I'm doing here. You'll stick this into the hole, hold the ball of the pin vise with the palm of your hand, and rotate. And be careful. Just take your time when you do it. And what works best is to drill. You'll apply some pressure, and then pull out to get the excess sawdust out. This pin vise, you want to make sure that the drill bit is extending approximately 1.25 inches out of the tip of the pin vise. And you'll basically just drill this hole until the pin vise bottoms out at the hole. So I've got about 1/4 inch to go. Again, it's helpful every once in a while to pull out the pin vise just to get the sawdust out. And you see now the hole drilled all the way to the bottom of the hole, so that hole is appropriately deep. Just kind of back out the pin vise. And we've now drilled a hole, so that's the first hole. You just proceed to do the exact same thing on all 4 corners of the car, and that's how you drill your holes. Okay, so we just finished drilling all 4 holes. Before you remove the C-clamp, it's a good idea to mark on the car which side is the back, which is the back end, and which is the front end. So I always just write a B on the back, B on the back of the car for back, write an F for front. And that way you know which are the rear holes and which are the front holes. Once we've done that, we can remove the C-clamp. And remove the jig. And you've now got your block drilled for your axles. Now before you do anything else, it's a good idea at this point to pre-insert your axles into the body of the car. These nails are going to fit quite tightly into these holes, so it's going to be fairly difficult to get them in. And now is a good time to loosen up those holes a little bit. So what I like to do is to insert the axle and then press it in. It may be helpful to kind of go like this, and you'll press it in. Okay, so like so, and then it's going to be difficult to get out, but you can just use a small pair of pliers or needle nose pliers and simply twist it a little bit to get this nail back out. And you might want to do this a couple times again, so just to loosen up these holes so that it's a firm fit, but it's not so tight that when you go to get your axles in the car breaks. So it's a good idea. Try doing that maybe twice on each axle hole. Now your car's ready to go. A quick note, there's a reason that we use this pin vise and we drill these holes by hand. This jig is made out of a relatively soft metal. It's made of aluminum. And in the past, and I know from experience, I've used a power drill to drill the holes. What happened is I used it twice, and the power drill is powerful enough and it applies enough torque to the side of these holes that it actually routed out the holes in this jig. So please do not use a power drill when you're drilling these holes. Please use this so that you can ensure that the jig will last for a long time for Pack 388. Okay, now that we've talked about drilling your holes, we're going to talk about some tips and techniques for making your car go fast. Well, the biggest key with a Pinewood Derby car to making it go fast is where the weight is located in the car. These cars don't have an engine, they rely on gravity, but one way that you can make your car go as fast as possible is to put the weight as far back into the car as possible. And the reason that works, the car is on an angle, so basically the higher the weight is on the hill, the farther it has to fall. So if you take a look at this car, you can see it's actually been hollowed out. And then the weight, you can't really see it, it's been painted over, but it has a bunch of fishing sinkers, lead fishing sinkers in the back end. This was a very fast car, and it was fast because it had that weight concentrated in the back of the car. The same builder, the next year, took the same concept, but he just did a little bit more extreme. This year, he took the maximum amount of weight that he could out of the car, so he made the car as light as possible so that he could then add in as much weight as possible to the back end of the car. And you can see, to make the car itself lighter, you can see where he hollowed out a pocket on the underside of the car. And this year, rather than using fishing sinkers, he used tungsten weight, which you can buy online. But he put in tungsten, basically round shot, and tungsten pellets in the back of the car. So you can see all the weight is at the very back of this car. This was a very fast car. Here's another example of a car. Now, this car was designed to be as light as possible. You can see that it's very thin. And again, the car was hollowed out in the back, and this builder used tungsten weights in the back. The weights are actually not in the car. But if you look, you can see that there were little pockets hollowed out to accept the tungsten weights, and there was a little bit of lead shot used in this car as well. Here's a body of a car. This uses the same concept, but this car was hollowed out so that the car body only weighed 6 grams. And then again, tungsten weights were added to the back of the car. So basically, you want to make your car as light as possible, and then you want to put the weight to get up to your 5 ounces in the back end of the car so that the car is weighted as far back as possible. This will give you an idea about what we're talking about. You can see here this car is you can't feel it on video, but I can show you where the car balances, and the car, it's wanting to flip up on me, but the balance point is right in front of the rear wheels. If you take a look at where that car balances, this will show you how much weight there is in the back end of this car. So that's really that's what you're looking for, is you want to get your weight as far back into the car as possible, because that's basically the engine of your car. You're going to maximize the speed of the vehicle. Okay, your options for weighting your car include, this is probably the most economical way, is you can just simply buy some washers at the hardware store. They come in different sizes, different shapes. These are fairly inexpensive. Another good option is lead fishing sinkers. The only caveat I would add to that is that lead is somewhat toxic, so after your kids use the lead or after handling it, make sure you wash your hands with soap and water. And I believe the rules require that there be no exposed lead in the car, so you need to cover the lead up with paint or cover it with a piece of tape or something like that, so that just for safety reasons. There's also this is available widely on the internet. It's fairly expensive. It costs about $20 for 4 ounces, but you can buy tungsten in various shapes and sizes, and a lot of builders are now using tungsten weights. Here's a car, an example. If you want to zoom in on this, you can see this uses tungsten cubes and tungsten plates, but again, this is a car that's weighted very heavily in the rear. The balance point of this car is just about a ½ an inch in front of the rear wheels. So again, it shows that you can get the maximum rear weighting, maximum amount of rear weighting if you utilize tungsten or a heavy metal such as lead. This is one more example of a car using tungsten as weight. As again, you can see that the body's been hollowed out to make the body as light as possible, and then they've added in the maximum possible amount of weight in the back end of the car using tungsten. This car uses tungsten cubes in the rear, and there's a little bit of tungsten putty. Again, these are materials that are available online. It is fairly expensive. Tungsten costs about $20 for 4 ounces, but it's an excellent way to weight your car. One thing that you can do to make your car go a lot faster is to smooth the shaft of your axle. If you look at the axle, there's 3 raised ridges on the shaft, and on the underside of the head of the nail, there is 2 raised ridges as well. If you mount the wheel on that axle, it's not going to roll very well because the axle itself is so rough. So what we want to do is to try to smooth out or sand down those axles. An easy way to do that is to mount the axle into the chuck of an electric drill. You can then get some sandpaper and cut it in a small strip like this. Wrap it around the axle, and then what I'd recommend is using various grits. Start out with probably 150 grit sandpaper and sand that down, and then you can go in progressively smoother, finer grits. Go to 200, 400. You can find at automotive specialty stores grits as fine as 800, 1,000, and 2,000. But basically, you want to sand your axle until you get rid of those raised ridges, and then use the progressively smoother grits of sandpaper to make the axle as smooth as possible. So we've talked a little bit about polishing your axles, but in reality, to make your axles really smooth, to make them where they're really good quality axles, is fairly difficult to do, and it can be fairly expensive. I know personally we didn't have access to 200, 400, 800, 1,000 grit sandpaper, so I ran out and I bought some, but I found myself with 6 different grades of sandpaper, and I probably spent $20 to $30 just in sandpaper alone to try to improve on the axles on the nails. One thing that is allowed within the rules is you can use aftermarket axles. There's several websites out there that sell various aftermarket wheels and aftermarket axles. Maximum Velocity is one site that I would recommend. But Maximum Velocity has a variety of different aftermarket axles that you can buy for as little as $2.95, I believe, per set of axles. So it's almost cheaper to buy a set of aftermarket axles than it is to try to fix the axles out of the box. So it's just one thing you might want to take in consideration. They also sell a variety of aftermarket wheels, which are official BSA wheels that have simply been lathed on the tread. Now those things cost probably in a range of $10 to $20 per set of wheels. So it's up to you whether or not you want to spend that. I would say that the axles, for $3, and they may have some other ones that are, more higher tech, but that's an excellent investment. The wheels, I would say you get lesser bang for the buck, and the wheels are generally more expensive, but that's something you can opt to do if you wish as well. Okay, now we're going to talk about an advanced building technique called rail riding. And let me caution you, this takes a fair amount of work to do properly, and if it's not done properly, it will definitely make your car slower. So if you want to make your car as fast as possible and are willing to spend a fair amount of time in pursuit of that goal, this is a good thing to try. But if you don't have a fair amount of time to be able to take the time to do it properly, I'd recommend against doing this. That being said, if you want to build a rail rider, what a rail rider is basically it's a car that runs on 3 wheels. One of the 2 front wheels is lifted up off of the track, and the other front wheel then steers the car into the rail. And the rail is a portion in the center of the track. It's kind of like a monorail, and that's what guides the car down the track. By making a rail rider that runs on 3 wheels, that third wheel that contacts the track, the front wheel, steers into the rail, and it makes the car go perfectly straight down the track, and it makes for a much faster car. If you've got a car that has 4 wheels touching the track, the car will tend to wobble back and forth, bouncing back and forth as it goes down the track, and that tends to slow the car down quite a bit. So this is a way that you can make your car a lot faster. To do that, you need to basically drill only 3 holes in your car using this jig when you initially set it up. So this is a block where we've drilled our 2 back axles, and we've only drilled a hole for 1 of the front axles. So here's our front axle hole. It's on the left side, and we've not yet drilled our front right hole. So on the front right hole, we're going to drill that hole a little higher, and you can do that with this jig. So what we've done, to make sure that you put the axle so that it's straight across from your other hole that we've already drilled, I've made a mark parallel to the hole. And that mark goes across the bottom, and I've brought it up the side of the car. That will allow us to know where it is we're drilling. The jig has another hole that will allow you to drill a hole slightly higher than the other holes you've already drilled. So you'll put this into the jig like this. So you put the jig basically onto the side of the block, and you'll want to line, I don't know if the camera will show this, but there's a notch right here on the jig, and you'll want to line that notch up with the line that we've drawn. Then, just as we've done before, you can drill this hole using the pin vise. Oops. And put it into the bottom of the jig. The next step in building a rail rider is bending the axle. By bending the axle that touches the track, you'll be able to steer the car. So what we want to do is mark a position on the axle so we know where to put it into the vise, so we know where we're going to bend the axle. So what I do is I put the axle through the wheel, and then with a Sharpie or a marking pen, just kind of make a mark just inside the wheel hub, and that'll show us where we're going to bend the axle. Okay, you can see the mark on the nail. What we're going to do is put the nail into the vise just even with the mark that we've made. Like so. Then to bend the nail, you want to bend the nail just a nominal amount. We don't want a tremendous bend. So what I just get the hammer and just give it a couple whacks until you can see a bend. Here's a picture of the nail. As you can see, we really didn't bend it very much. It's a subtle bend, but just enough that'll allow you to steer the car. When you're building the rail rider, the wheel that touches the track, you want to inset the wheel on that particular side. So what we've done is we've cut a notch out of the front end of the car. You want to cut out about 1/8 of an inch. So as you can see on this car, we've narrowed up the front end by about 1/8 of an inch on the side of the wheel that touches the track. Okay, now that we've bent our axle, I'm going to show how the bent axle works and how it allows you to steer the car. Imagine that this here is it's overly large, but imagine that this is our axle. You want to put the bend side down, okay, like this. So now we've got the wheel, and it's actually going to kind of ride on the side of the wheel to some extent. So again, the bent part goes down, whether it's on the right or left side of the car. And then to steer the car into the rail, you want to rotate that axle just slightly towards the front of the car. So, and you can understand this, if I rotate the bend this way, you can see that all of a sudden the car is going to steer this way. If I were to bend it back, it would steer to the right. So right now, just kind of as I rotate this bent axle, the car is going to steer one way or the other. And again, what we want to do is have the bend down, pointing downwards, and then we just want to turn it, rotate it with a pair of needle nose pliers such that it steers inwards. And we're going to show you now about how far you want the car to steer. Okay, now that we've got the bent axle in our car, we've used a pair of needle nose pliers to rotate that axle so that it's bent slightly forward. And these cars now have been tuned, and I want to show you what your ultimate goal is. When we push our car, we want it to steer into the rail. We want it to steer approximately 4 inches over 6 feet. So if I set this car straight and I push it, it should follow this line in a straight fashion, but watch what happens. The car steers left. We'll try that on a different car. Give it a little bit more of a push. You can see all these cars have the right front wheel is the wheel that is touching the track, and that right front wheel is steering left, steering that wheel into the rail. So we're just going to summarize a couple of things on the top tips on how to build a fast car. The first thing is to drill your holes, and drilling your holes is going to give you optimal alignment. The car is going to be really a lot faster if you drill those holes and you have that alignment versus using the slots. The second thing is weighting your car. We talked about weighting your car. You want to put the weight in the back, okay? Make your car as light as possible so that you can add as much weight as possible in the back end. And again, your goal should be to make the car balance, somewhere just in front of the rear wheels. Ideally, you almost can't put your weight too far back. It's almost impossible to have too much weight in the back end of the car. We also talked about axles. You can sand them down, or my personal preference is to order a set of aftermarket axles, because for $3 you can get axles that don't have these raised ridges on them. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. We've talked about building a rail rider. Again, that's an advanced technique. If it's not done right, it'll make your car slower, so you're going to have to make the decision if you do or don't want to build a rail rider. But it's certainly the technique that's used by most of the top cars in the council. We also haven't touched up on lube. I'd recommend using graphite for lubricating your axles. You're going to read a lot of stuff online. There's a lot of people are using oil, but I would caution you that oil is exceedingly difficult to use properly. There's only one type of oil that the vast majority of people use. It costs about $20 for a fraction of an ounce, and even using that, it's very difficult to make oil faster than just running straight graphite. So I'd recommend using graphite to lubricate your axles. And on balance, I guess I'd urge you to do research if you want to. There's a ton of information out there on the internet on how to build a fast car. If you follow these basic principles that we've talked about, you can build a car that's capable of winning a pack and probably capable of winning at most district levels if you just take the time and pay attention to the details. What's most important, though, and I gear this towards the dads, is just having fun with your kid. You can take Pinewood Derby to whatever level. There are people who literally spend thousands of dollars on equipment. They buy their own tracks. If you want to do it to that level, great. As long as you're doing it with your son and your son's having fun, that's wonderful. But you can also, just using these rudimentary tools, build a very fast car and still have a great time with it. So have fun with Pinewood Derby. Take it to whatever level you want, but what's more important is make sure that your son's having fun.